Hmm.
From the antiquities to the previous. From the antiquities to the previous century, we have seen some medical treatments that, in retrospect, are misguided. From bloodletting to lobotomies to medications made out of mercury and radioactive materials, humanity has repeatedly committed ourselves towards the wrong course in the name of medicine and science. On the other hand, medicine and science does eventually self-correct, and as the farther we walk down this wrong path, it becomes increasingly self-evident that we are not on the right track. The most recent example I can think of is Oxycontin. The safety profile of this drug was vastly overstated in large part due to an active campaign by the Saccharin.
Oh, I am live. Hello. I think. It says I'm live. Hello. Oh, that's me. Okay. Okay. Odd. Okay, I'm live. Okay, we got YouTube working, and there goes W Place. Yes, yes, I hear you, W Place. Okay. Fun start to a stream. I'm only going to stream for a little bit, but I really want to work on this comic for a bit, so.
Remarkable feat might be achieved, much less any discussion of the track record of attempts to undo military conquests through diplomacy or boycotts. There has also been a repeat of media leaders taking a sympathetic view of nations opposed to their own. Columnist Robert Novak, for example, revealed a discussion he had with cable news network CNN founder Ted Turner, who, as indicated by Novak's account, also repeated the 1920s and 1930s pattern of equating believers in military deterrence with advocates of war. As we walked across Lafayette Square on the way to my office, Turner said, "I can't understand, Novak, why you're in favor of all-out nuclear war." He then launched a defense of the Kremlin's arms control policies and lauded the people's paradise in Cuba. I tried to argue back, but it was tough getting a word in edgewise with Ted Turner. When we reached my 13th floor office, I introduced him to a young woman in the Evans and Novak outer office whose main job was handling the phone calls. Turner looked her in the eye and asked, "How do you feel working for a man who is in favor of a nuclear holocaust?" The woman looked at Ted as though he were mad, and to a certain extent, he was. The Iraq Wars. Two wars against Iraq, beginning respectively in 1991 and in 2003, were fought under the specter of the Vietnam War, with predictions of another quagmire in both cases, though the 1991 war in fact successfully drove Iraq out of Kuwait in short order, with minimal American casualties and overwhelming losses inflicted on Iraqi armed forces. Tom Wicker of the New York Times, for example, in 1990, foresaw a bloody and ill-conceived war against Iraq, one with devastating casualties for United States forces. Anthony Lewis of the New York Times speculated that there might be 20,000 American casualties. A Washington Post writer reported a mathematical model developed at the Brookings Institution that produced an optimistic estimate of more than 1,000 American deaths in the 1991 Iraq War and a pessimistic estimate of more than 4,000 deaths. In reality, 148 Americans were killed in combat during the First Iraq War. The Second Iraq War, beginning in 2003, was more like most wars, with unforeseen setbacks and unpredictable side effects, quite aside from debatable issues about the wisdom of the invasion or the nature of its goals. Despite the swift military defeat of the Iraqi armed forces, peace was not restored because of a reign of terror, directed in part against American troops, but primarily against Iraqi civilians, by both domestic and foreign terrorists, determined to prevent a very different kind of government from being established in the Middle East under American auspices. As in the case of the Vietnam War, much of the media and the intelligentsia in general declared what was happening in Iraq to be a civil war and unwinnable, and many urged the immediate withdrawal of American troops. When instead there was in 2007 an increase in the number of American troops, called a surge, in order to suppress the rampant terrorism. This surge was widely condemned in advance as futile by the intelligentsia, in the media, and in Congress. In January 2007, New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd dismissed the idea as President Bush's nonsensical urge to surge. New York Times columnist Paul Krugman said, "The only real question about the planned surge in Iraq, which is better described as a Vietnam-style escalation, is whether its proponents are cynical or delusional." In February 2007, the Washington Post said, "Mr. Bush's surge is unlikely to produce a breakthrough toward peace. In fact, the violence may continue to worsen." The St. Louis Post-Dispatch said, "It's too little, too late." An op-ed column in the Philadelphia Tribune called the war unwinnable. The New Republic asked rhetorically, "So who in Washington actually believes this surge will work?" Answering their own question, they said, "Only one man, Vice President Dick Cheney." But, they added, "Sooner or later, even for Dick Cheney, reality must intrude." Even the tone of utter certainty and condescension echoed that of the 1920s and 1930s intelligentsia. Among those in politics who condemned the surge in advance was a future president of the United States, Senator Barack Obama, who said in January 2007 that the impending surge was a mistake that I and others will actively oppose in the days to come. He called the projected surge a reckless escalation and introduced legislation to begin removal of American troops from Iraq no later than May 1st, 2007, with the goal of removing all United States combat forces from Iraq by March 31st, 2008. Senator Obama said, "Escalation has already been tried, and it has already failed because no amount of American forces can solve the political differences that lie at the heart of somebody else's civil war. Another 20,000 American troops will not in any imaginable way be able to accomplish any new progress." Senator Obama was not alone. Senator Edward Kennedy proposed requiring congressional approval before there could be a surge. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi sent a letter to President Bush cautioning against the surge strategy. "Surging forces is a strategy that we have already tried and that has already failed," they said, and called the upcoming surge a serious mistake. Senator Hillary Clinton was also among those in Congress opposing the surge, and former Senator John Edwards called for an immediate withdrawal of American troops. A later 2009 Brookings Institution study of fatalities in 2007 among Iraqi civilians, the main target of terrorist attacks, showed such fatalities to have been an estimated 3,500 per month when predictions of failure of the surge were made in January 2007. In the wake of the surge, however, these fatalities fell to 750 per month by the end of the year. Fatalities among American troops in Iraq were 83 per month in January 2007, rose to a peak of 126 per month as military operations against terrorist strongholds increased, but fell to 23 per month by the end of the year, in the wake of the surge. At the time, however, there was fierce resistance among the intelligentsia to news that the surge was working.
Let's go. an idiot. I just realized, and I hate myself for it. Chatter Philippine call, but I think you're just spam. Sad. It's a fight for your life, a choice to make a fist. Laid out on the sidelines, you and no doubt. You're making sound, living on the time to decide. This bed you're hanging on my back never lets me any slack. Simply wanna let me walk. The hands of the misery I love. When I want, I burn into my own soul. He reminds me of my other winner. This magic hanging on my back. It's the strangest touch I ever had. It's simply will not let me be. Soaking in a misery. When I try to say the world is pretty unfair, he whispers in my ear I wouldn't go there. He simply will not let me be. Soaking in a misery. See,
Sheesh, not a spam on here.
it's a fight for your life, a choice to make, a fierce law. Lay down on the sidelines, either in or down. Your will make it sound, with a limit on the time to decide. His claws are digging in my back, using thoughts I wish I never had. It simply will not let me be. Buried by the misery, when I wanna cover my head to hide inside the blanket of a warm bed. He simply will not let me be. Buried by the misery, see, in the ring you'll find. It's a fight for your life, a choice to make, a fierce door. Lay down on the sidelines, either in or down. Your bell will make it sound, with the limit on that time. So scratching in my shirt has kept me from lying in the dirt. An itch that never seems to leave distracts me from the misery. He's keeping me from sinking into dark clouds. The heights that outward are lights now. He simply will not let me be. So in a misery, see, in the ring you'll find. It's a fight for your life, a choice to make, a fierce storm. Lay down on the sidelines, either in or down. Your bell will make it sound, with the limit on that time to decide. This magic hanging on my back never left me any slack. He simply will not let me walk. The hands of the misery I love. When I want a burden to my own soul, he reminds me of my youth, the winner handles. He simply will not let me be. Cages out of misery, see, in the ring you'll find. It's a fight for your life, a choice to make, a fierce storm. Lay down on the sidelines, either in or down. Your will make it sound, limit on that time to decide.
Simply will not.
Magic hanging on my back. It's the strangest touch I ever had. It simply will not let me be. Soaking in a misery. When I try to say the world is pretty unfair, he whispers in my ear I wouldn't go there. He simply will not let me be. Soaking in a misery. See, in the ring you'll find. It's a fight for your life, a choice to make, a fierce law. Lay down on the sidelines, either in or down. Your bell will make it sound, with a limit on the time to decide. His claws are digging in my back, using thoughts I wish I never had. It simply will not let me be. Buried by the misery, when I wanna cover my head to hide inside the blanket of a warm bed. He simply will not let me be. magic hanging on my back. It's the strangest touch I ever had. It simply will not let me be. Soaking in a misery. When I try to say the world is pretty unfair, he whispers in my ear I wouldn't go there. He simply will not let me be. Soaking in a misery. See, in the ring you'll find it's a fight for your life, a choice to make, a fist or lay down on the sidelines, either in or down. Your bell will make it sound with a limit on the time to decide. His claws are digging in my back, using thoughts I wish I never had. It simply will not let me be buried by the misery. When I wanna be blown to cover my head, the hearts I beg it up. One man, he simply will not let me be buried by the misery. See, in the ring you'll find it's a fight for your life, a choice to make, a fist or lay down on the sidelines, either in or out. Your bell will make it sound with the limit on that time to decide. So scratching in my shirt, escape me from lying in the dirt. An itch that never seems to leave distracts me from the misery. He's keeping me from sinking into dark clouds. The heights that I would go would rip my legs down. He simply will not let me be. So get in a misery. See, in the ring you'll find it's a fight for your life, a choice to make, a fist or lay down on the sidelines, either in or down. Your bell will make it sound with a limit on that time to decide. There's magic hanging on my back, never lends me any slack. He simply will not let me walk the hands of the misery I love. When I want a burden to my own soul, he reminds me of my youth when I had goals. He simply will not let me be caged inside a misery. See, in the ring you'll find it's a fight for your life, a choice to make, a fist or lay down on the sidelines, either in or down. Your bell will make it sound with a limit on that time to decide. It simply will not let me be. Buried by the misery. When I wanna be alone to cover my head, the hide inside the bag it up. One bed, he simply will not let me be. Buried by the misery. See, in the ring you will find it's a fight for your life. A choice to make a fist or lay down on the sidelines. Even or down, your bell will make it sound. Hit the limit on the time. So scratching in my shirt has kept me from lying in the dirt. An itch that never seems to leave distracts me from the misery. He's keeping me from sinking into dark clouds. The heights that I would go with my legs down. Simply will not let me be. So get in a misery. See, in the ring you'll find it's a fight for your life. A choice to make a fist or lay down on the sidelines. Either in or down, your bell will make it sound. Put the limit on that time to decide. This man hanging on my back never lends me any slack. He simply will not let me roll. The hands of the misery I love. When I want a burden to my own soul, he reminds me of my youth when I had goals. He simply will not let me be. Caged inside a misery. See, in the ring you'll find it's a fight for your life. A choice to make a fist or lay down on the sidelines. Either in or down, your bell will make it sound. The limit on their time to decide. This badge clinging on my back is the strangest touch I ever had. It simply will not let me be. Sulking in a misery. When I try to say the world is pretty unfair, he whispers in my ear I wouldn't go there. He simply will not let me be. Sulking in a misery. See, in the ring you'll find it's a fight for your life. A choice to make a fist or lay down on the sidelines. Either in or down, your bell will make it sound. With a limit on the time to decide. His claws are digging in my back, using thoughts I wish I never had. It simply will not let me be. Buried by the misery. When I wanna be alone to cover my head, the hide inside the bag it up. One bed, he simply will not let me be.
Midorimash. Nani. Alright. Now, where did I put that audiobook? There it is.
In June 2007, the Los Angeles Times said that there was no evidence that the surge is succeeding. In September 2007, under the title Snow Job in the Desert, New York Times columnist Paul Krugman lamented the Bush administration's remarkable success creating the perception that the surge is succeeding, even though there's not a shred of verifiable evidence to suggest that it is. New York Times columnist Frank Rich declared the decrease in violence failed to be insidious. Clearly, some people were determined to see this as another unwinnable war, another Vietnam. By 2009, however, even the New York Times was reporting, though not under banner headlines, that there had been large declines in fatalities among American troops in Iraq, Iraqi security forces, and Iraqi civilians, to a fraction of what their fatalities had been 2 years earlier, before the surge. There had also been an increase in the number of Iraqi security forces and in the country's electricity output. While the surge was going on in 2007, however, it was something exceptional when two Brookings Institution scholars, identifying themselves as people who had previously criticized the Bush administration's miserable handling of Iraq, nevertheless said after a visit to that country that we were surprised by the gains we saw and the potential to produce not necessarily victory, but a sustainable stability that both we and the Iraqis could live with. Other on-the-scene reports in 2007 likewise revealed substantial success against the terrorists in Iraq and a corresponding return to normalcy in Iraqi society, including a return of Iraqi expatriates who had fled the terrorism and resident Iraqis who now frequented public places where they had been fearful of going before. Those who were committed to the view that the war was unwinnable and a surge futile remained unchanged despite the growing evidence that the surge was working. In September 2007, New York Times columnist Paul Krugman said, "To understand what's really happening in Iraq, follow the oil money, which already knows that the surge has failed." Insistence that the surge was a failure only escalated as signs of its success began to appear. As the September 2007 date neared for General David Petraeus' report to Congress on the surge which he commanded, there were growing outcries in the media and in politics that the general would only try to verbally spin the failure of the surge into success. Senator Dick Durbin, for example, said that, by carefully manipulating the statistics, the Bush-Petraeus report will try to persuade us that violence in Iraq is decreasing and thus the surge is working. "We need to stop the surge and start to get our troops out," said Senator Joseph Biden in August 2007. These preemptive efforts at discrediting what Petraeus was about to report were climaxed by a full-page advertisement in the New York Times on the opening day of his testimony with a bold headline, "General Petraeus or General Betray Us," sponsored by the political activist organization MoveOn.org. The subtitle was, "Cooking the Books for the White House." The New York Times charged MoveOn.org less than half the usual rate for a full-page ad and waived its policy against ads making personal attacks. In short, General Petraeus was accused of lying before he said anything, and in the face of growing evidence from a number of other sources that in fact the surge has substantially reduced violence in Iraq. The hostile atmosphere in which General Petraeus and U.S. Ambassador Ryan Crocker testified before Congress was indicated by an account in USA Today. Following a day-long marathon Monday before two key House committees, they faced some of the Senate's most celebrated talkers, including 5 presidential candidates, in back-to-back hearings. In 10 hours of testimony, the two men got 2 bathroom breaks and less than 30 minutes for lunch. During these hearings, Senator Barbara Boxer said to General Petraeus, "I ask you to take off your rosy glasses." Hillary Clinton said that the general's report required the willing suspension of disbelief. Congressman Rahm Emanuel said that General Petraeus' report could win the Nobel Prize for Creative Statistics or the Pulitzer for Fiction. Congressman Robert Wexler declared that, among unbiased, nonpartisan experts, the consensus is stark. The surge has failed. He compared General Petraeus' testimony to the discredited testimony of General William Westmoreland during the Vietnam War. The same comparison was made by Frank Rich of the New York Times, who asserted that there were some eerie symmetries between General Petraeus' sales pitch and General William Westmoreland's similar mission for LBJ. This was just one of the signs that the ghost of the Vietnam War still loomed over later wars. Even the tactics of opponents of the Vietnam War reappeared in many places. According to USA Today, the testimony was punctuated by anti-war hecklers who rose one by one to shout slogans such as, "Generals lie, children die." Eventually, claims that the surge had failed as predicted faded away amid increasingly undeniable evidence that it had succeeded. But far from causing a reevaluation of the prevailing vision that had been so strident and so discredited by events, the success of the surge simply led to shrinking coverage of news from Iraq in much of the media. Unlike Vietnam, this time the military defeat of the enemy was prevented from being turned into a political surrender, though only at the 11th hour, when the cries for immediate withdrawal were loudest. These political developments reflected a prevailing vision of war growing out of the intelligentsia's perception of the Vietnam War, which, among other things, left a legacy of catchwords such as the insistently repeated unwinnable and quagmire. As in so many other areas, mundane facts to the contrary had little impact on the prevailing vision. Even when politicians said what they did for their own political purposes, those purposes could be served only because there were many others who sincerely believed the prevailing vision and would support those who espoused those beliefs. Once again, as in other times and places, the influence of the intelligentsia did not depend upon their convincing the holders of power, but only on their creating a climate of opinion, providing incentives and constraints affecting what the holders of power could say and do. Another throwback to the Vietnam War era was the highly publicized combat veteran who proclaimed his opposition to the war, and who later turned out not to have been a combat veteran at all. As the New York Times reported, after the truth about one of these combat veterans came out belatedly, the thick-muscled man with close-cropped hair who called himself Rick Duncan seemed right out of central casting as a prop for a Democratic candidate running against Bush administration policies last fall. A former Marine Corps captain who suffered brain trauma from a roadside bomb in Iraq and was at the Pentagon during the September 11th attacks, an advocate for veterans' rights who opposed the war, an Annapolis graduate who is proudly gay. With his gold-plated credentials, he commanded the respect and attention of not just politicians, but also police chiefs, reporters, and veterans advocates for the better part of 2 years. Yet, except for his first name, virtually none of his story was true. That this man's easily checked lies passed muster in the media for 2 years suggests once again the receptivity of the intelligentsia to things that fit their vision, however unsubstantiated those things might be otherwise. During the Second Iraq War, the American intelligentsia repeated the patterns of the intelligentsia in France between the two world wars, namely, the verbal reduction of combat soldiers from the status of patriotic heroes to that of pitiable victims. Even stories about the financial problems of reservists called away from their jobs to go on active duty in Iraq, or stories about the simple fact of sad goodbyes to friends or family members in the military being sent overseas, made the front pages of the New York Times, while stories about the heroism of American troops in combat in Iraq or Afghanistan either went unreported or appeared on inside pages. Stories of extraordinary bravery of Americans under fire that won Congressional Medals of Honor, including men throwing themselves on enemy hand grenades, sacrificing their own lives to save the lives of those around them, were reported on pages 13 and 14, respectively, and one in the second section of the New York Times. The Washington Post and the Los Angeles Times similarly buried these stories of extraordinary heroism on the inside pages, and much of television news followed suit, either downplaying or completely ignoring such stories. Negative stories, on the other hand, found instant prominence in the media, even when unsubstantiated. For example, much outrage was expressed in the media during the early days of the Iraq War, when a claim was made that looters had pillaged precious artifacts from an Iraqi museum, which American soldiers had failed to protect. That men fighting with their lives on the line were supposed to divert their attention to protecting museums was a remarkable enough premise, but the charge itself turned out to be false. The artifacts in question had been secreted by the museum staff in order to protect them from looters and from the dangers of war. Yet the media had not waited to substantiate the charges against the American military before bursting into print with these charges and bursting with indignation over them. The American military's positive achievements in general, whether in battle or in restoring civil order or carrying out humanitarian activities, received little attention in the media, while the Iraq War began to disappear from the front pages of the New York Times as terrorist attacks declined in the wake of the surge, and coverage shrank similarly in other media. American casualties continued to be highlighted, even when those casualties were in single digits, and the cumulative casualties were constantly featured, even though these casualties were by no means high compared to other wars. In fact, all the Americans killed in the 2 Iraq wars put together were fewer than those killed taking the one island of Iwo Jima during the Second World War, or 1 day of fighting at Antietam during the Civil War. Unless one believes that wars can be fought with no casualties, there was nothing unusual about the casualty rate in the First or Second Iraq War, except for its being lower than in most wars. But casualties fit the constant theme of soldiers as victims, and verbal virtuosity has enabled this victimization message to be characterized as supporting the troops, or even honoring troops. After the New York Times published photographs of dying and dead American soldiers in Iraq, its executive editor replied to criticisms by declaring that death and carnage are part of the story, and to launder them out of our account of the war would be a disservice. Such verbal virtuosity creates a straw man of laundering out the fact of deaths in war, which no one has ever doubted, and equates publishing photos of individual soldiers in the throes of death with just telling the story, while burying stories of soldiers' heroism deep inside the paper. The same depiction of soldiers as victims dominated news stories of veterans returning home from combat. Problems of returning veterans, such as alcoholism or homelessness, were featured in the media, with no attempt to compare the incidence of such problems to the incidence of the same problems among the civilian population. In other words, if all returning veterans were not completely immune to the problems that civilians experienced, that was presented as if it were a special problem brought on by military service. A front-page article in the New York Times of January 13, 2008, for example, featured killings in the United States by veterans returning from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In many of those cases, it said, combat trauma and the stress of deployment were among the factors which appear to have set the stage for a tragedy that was part destruction, part self-destruction. This particular attempt to picture veterans as victims failed to compare the homicide rate of returning veterans with the homicide rate among civilians of the same ages. Had they done so, it was pointed out in the New York Post, they would have found that the homicide rate among returning veterans was 1/5 that among civilians of the same ages. Undaunted, the New York Times returned to the same theme in a front-page story a year later in 2009, again going into gory details in individual cases, with no mention of the rate of homicides among military veterans compared to civilians of the same ages. Another promotion of the image of victimhood among military veterans was a story about suicide rates in the military, having reached the highest since the Army began keeping records, as the New York Times put it, in a story echoed throughout the media. Yet, once again, there was no comparison with suicide rates among people of the same demographic characteristics in the civilian population, which was higher than among people in the military, as the Associated
Really?
Press reported, but which
Really?
few media outlets mentioned. Once again, much of the media filtered out facts that went against their vision, leaving their readers with a wholly distorted picture. Like the Times of London in the 1930s, the New York Times in a later era took the lead in filtering and slanting news to fit its vision. Patriotism and
annoying.
national honor. No matter how much journalists, politicians, or others undermine a war effort, anyone calling such actions unpatriotic is automatically met with the indignant response, "How dare you question my patriotism?" Just why patriotism is something that is unreasonable or unworthy to question is something for which no argument is advanced, unless endless repetition is considered to be an argument. This is not to say that anyone with whom one disagrees about a war or any other issue can be automatically called unpatriotic. That is not a charge to be either automatically accepted or automatically rejected. Even actions detrimental to a country's self-defense are not automatically unpatriotic in intention. It is not necessary to assume that the intelligentsia of the 1930s, for example, deliberately set out to do such things as making their own countries vulnerable to military attack. As noted in Chapter 7, Georges Lapierre, the leader of the French Teachers Union's campaigns to promote pacifism in France's textbooks during the 1920s and 1930s, downplaying national pride and national defense, nevertheless, after the fall of France in 1940, joined the French underground resistance movement against the Nazi conquerors, and as a result ended up being captured and sent to his death in Dachau. He was clearly not an unpatriotic man, but whatever his intentions during the interwar years, the more important question is the ultimate effect of his efforts on a whole generation. Many other pre-war pacifist teachers also ended up fighting in the French resistance movement after the vision they had promoted for so long led to opposite results from what they were seeking. They had, in Burke's words from an earlier time, helped bring about the worst results without being the worst of men. In their own minds, the teachers wove together patriotism and pacifism, according to an account of that era. But regardless of what went on inside those educators' minds, the net result out in the real world was the same as if they had deliberately undermined the patriotism of a whole generation of their students, for whom they made internationalism as well as pacifism prime virtues, despite whatever passing mention there might be of love of country as a subordinate aspect of a love of humanity in general. A much larger question.
quiet. Alright, back to my audiobook.
And then the patriotism or lack of patriotism of particular individuals or institutions is the question of how consequential patriotism itself is, and the related question of how consequential a sense of national honor is. Patriotism has long been viewed by many intellectuals as a psychological phenomenon with no substantive basis. Back in the 18th century, William Godwin referred to patriotism as high-sounding nonsense and the unmeaning rant of romance. As noted in Chapter 7, such views were still common in the 20th century during the period between the two world wars, among such prominent European intellectuals as Bertrand Russell, H.G. Wells, Romain Rolland, Kingsley Martin, Aldous Huxley, and J.B. Priestley, among others. In America, John Dewey decried patriotism as something that degenerates into a hateful conviction of intrinsic superiority, and national honor as a touchy and testy honor based on emotion and fantasy. But how consequential patriotism and national honor are cannot be determined a priori by how much either of them does or does not conform to the vision of the anointed. As with many other things, how consequential they are can be discovered by what happens in their absence. When Hitler launched an invasion of France in 1940, against the advice of his top generals, it was because he was convinced that contemporary France was lacking in these supposedly irrelevant qualities. And the sudden collapse of the French, despite their military advantages, suggests that these qualities are indeed consequential. What is called national honor is a long-run perspective on national decisions and their consequences, the opposite of the one-day-at-a-time rationalism by which France had declined to fight over the militarization of the Rhineland in 1936, or to live up to the French Mutual Defense Treaty with Czechoslovakia in 1938, or to seriously engage the Germans militarily during the long months of the phony war following the formal declaration of war in 1939, despite France's large military superiority on the Western Front, while Hitler's troops were concentrated in the east, conquering Poland. A willingness to fight can be a deterrent to attack, and conversely, an unwillingness to meet a challenge or provocation can make a nation a target for an all-out assault. National honor is simply an idiomatic expression for this long-run perspective on national interest, as distinguished from a one-day-at-a-time perspective, which may serve the short-run interests of politicians by sparing them from making the hard decisions which distinguish a politician from a statesman. But many intellectuals have tried to reduce a sense of national honor, like patriotism, to a psychological quirk, and certainly a very insufficient reason for hostilities, in Godwin's words. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, the man most indelibly identified with the policy of appeasement of Hitler, belatedly seemed to acknowledge that national honor was consequential just months before the Second World War began. I had the opportunity yesterday of exchanging a few words with M. Blum, the French socialist leader and former prime minister, and he said to me that in his view, and in the view of all the socialist friends with whom he had talked, there was only one danger of war in Europe, and that was a very real one. It was that the impression should get about that Great Britain and France were not in earnest, and that they could not be relied upon to carry out their promises. If that were so, no greater, no more deadly mistake could be made, and it would be a frightful thing if Europe were to be plunged into war on account of a misunderstanding. In short, Europe and the world were on the brink of a catastrophic war because neither friend nor foe believed that Britain and France had national honor. That is, there was no sense of a firm resolve by the British or the French, on which friendly nations could stake their own survival by relying on allying themselves with Britain or France, at the cost of incurring the wrath of Nazi Germany. Likewise, there was no sense among belligerent nations that they need fear anything more serious than temporizing words from Britain and France. What was lacking in Chamberlain's statement on the eve of war was any acknowledgement that it was his own policies and similar policies in France, substituting talk for action, which had created this deadly misconception that all they would ever do was talk. Hitler was in fact quite surprised when his invasion of Poland led to declarations of war by Britain and France. If the Second World War grew out of a misunderstanding, British and French sacrifice of national honor 1 year earlier at Munich fostered that misunderstanding, and their belated refusal to sacrifice national honor a second time meant war. The ultimate and bitter irony was that it was Neville Chamberlain's fate to make the declaration of war against Germany in 1939, which turned a regional invasion of Poland into the Second World War, the most catastrophic war in history, a war which he had striven to avoid at virtually all costs, brushing aside 2 years earlier the old stand-upon-your-dignity methods that had once been part of the concept of national honor. Instead, Chamberlain operated on the basis of one-day-at-a-time rationalism, in which, as he said in 1938, we can remove the danger spots one by our willingness to face realities which we cannot change. But just 1 year later, Chamberlain abandoned that one-day-at-a-time rationalism when he declared, "We are not prepared to sit by and see the independence of one country after another successively destroyed," even though he now had fewer potential allies left, after having abandoned Austria and Czechoslovakia to Nazi conquest, and was now in a weaker position from which to try to change the reality of Hitler's and Stalin's joint conquest of Poland. The ultimate issue was never Austria, Czechoslovakia, or Poland as such. The issue was whether Hitler was to be allowed to upset the whole balance of power in Europe, on which peace depended, to the fatal disadvantage of Britain and France, simply by doing so in installments, with Britain and France posing the issue in each case in terms of one-day-at-a-time rationalism, while Hitler posed the issue explicitly in terms of the national honor of a great people, in other words, a long-run interest that he was willing to fight for. As for Chamberlain's dismissal of the old stand-upon-your-dignity methods, John Maynard Keynes saw the flaw in that. Our strength is great, but our statesmen have lost the capacity to appear formidable. It is in that loss that our greatest danger lies. Our power to win a war may depend on increased armaments, but our power to avoid a war depends not less on our recovering that capacity to appear formidable, which is a quality of will and demeanor. Keynes said of Neville Chamberlain, "He is not escaping the risks of war, he is only making sure that when it comes, we shall have no friends and no common cause." Just 2 years later, these words became painfully prophetic, when Britain stood alone facing the wrath of Nazi Germany, as Hitler's Luftwaffe began bombing London and other places in the south of England, while a German invasion force was being assembled across the Channel on the coast of conquered France. The misconceptions on which Chamberlain had operated for years did not originate with him. They were part of the atmosphere of the times, an atmosphere intellectuals made a major contribution. Despite a tendency in some intellectual circles to see the nation as just a subordinate part of the world at large, some acting or even describing themselves as citizens of the world, patriotism is, in one sense, little more than a recognition of the basic fact that one's own material well-being, personal freedom, and sheer physical survival depend on the particular institutions, traditions, and policies of the particular nation in which one lives.
Well, hello.
There is no comparable world government, and without the concrete institutions of government, there is nothing to be a citizen of, or to have enforceable rights, however lofty or poetic it may sound, to be a citizen of the world. When one's fate is clearly recognized as dependent on the surrounding national framework, the institutions, traditions, and norms of one's country, then the preservation of that framework cannot be a matter of indifference, while each individual pursues purely individual interests. Patriotism is a recognition of a shared fate and the shared responsibilities that come with it. National honor is a recognition that one day at a time rationalism is a delusion that enables politicians to escape the responsibilities of statesmanship. Conditions may become so repugnant in one country that it makes sense to move to another country, but there is no such thing as moving to the world. One may, of course, live in a country parasitically, accepting all the benefits for which others have sacrificed, both in the past and in the present, while rejecting any notion of being obliged to do the same. But once that attitude becomes general, the country becomes defenseless against forces of either internal disintegration or external aggression. In short, patriotism and national honor cannot be reduced to simply psychological quirks to which intellectuals can consider themselves superior, without risking dire consequences, of which France in 1940 was a classic example. It was considered chic in some circles in France of the 1930s to say, rather Hitler than Blum, but that was before they experienced living under Hitler, or dying after dehumanization in Hitler's concentration camps. Disdain for patriotism and national honor was just one of the attitudes among the intellectuals of the 1920s and 1930s, to reappear with renewed force in Western democracies in the 1960s and afterwards. How far history will repeat itself on this and other issues is a question for the future to answer. Indeed, it is the question for the future of the Western world. Chapter 9. Intellectuals and Society. The study of history is a powerful antidote to contemporary arrogance. It is humbling to discover how many of our glib assumptions, which seem to us novel and plausible, have been tested before, not once but many times, and in innumerable guises, and discovered to be, at great human cost, wholly false. Paul Johnson. To understand the role of intellectuals in society, we must understand what they do, not what they say they do, or even what they may think they are doing, but what in fact are their actions and the social consequences of those actions. We can begin by trying to understand the incentives and constraints inherent in the role of intellectuals, as compared to people who are in other occupations. Individual intellectuals may say and do all sorts of things for all sorts of reasons, but when we try to understand general patterns among the intelligentsia as a whole, we need to examine the circumstances in which they operate, their track records, and their impact on the larger society around them. Among people whose occupations require high levels of mental ability, including mathematicians, chess grandmasters, scientists, and others, we have defined as intellectuals those whose end products are ideas, as distinguished from tangible creations, such as those of engineers, or services, such as those of physicians and pilots. This dichotomy is not arbitrary. It conforms more or less to general usage, and, more important, there are behavioral differences between intellectuals so defined and others whose work is likewise mentally demanding, and who may in many cases be academic colleagues on the same campuses. These differences have much to do with both the supply and the demand for intellectuals in their roles as public intellectuals, people whose words contribute to the general atmosphere in which consequential decisions are made for society as a whole. Sometimes public intellectuals affect social outcomes by their direct advocacy of particular policies, but sometimes their effect is indirect when they simply explain their particular specialty, whether economics, criminology, or some other subject, in a way that laymen can understand, and which therefore influences public understanding and public opinion, whether or not these particular public intellectuals directly advocate one policy or another. Perhaps more consequential than either of these roles of intellectuals is their creating a general set of presumptions, beliefs, and imperatives, a vision, that serves as a general framework for the way particular issues and events that come along are perceived. For this, it is not necessary to be a public intellectual who addresses the population at large. Such disparate figures as Charles Darwin and Friedrich Hayek have had enormous influence over people who never read a word of theirs, but who absorbed their vision from others who had read them and received their direct impact. What John Maynard Keynes called the gradual encroachment of ideas can change the way we see the world as it exists and change how we think the world ought to be. While the word intellectual as a noun refers to a set of people in a given occupation, as an adjective it connotes a set of standards and achievements which may or may not characterize the actual behavior of most people in that occupation. Certainly, as public intellectuals, commenting on issues and events outside the realm of their respective specialties, intellectuals have not always exhibited intellectual standards, to put it mildly. Yet the many violations of those standards by intellectuals themselves have demonstrated repeatedly the distinction that they seek to blur between the noun and the adjective. These include such blatant examples of illogic as the one observation trend, capitalism having made workers poor, as if they were more prosperous before, and the one-country international comparison in which Professor Lester Thoreau pronounced the United States the worst of the industrial nations when it comes to unemployment, by citing unemployment problems solely in the United States, while ignoring chronically worse unemployment problems in Western Europe and elsewhere. One of the most common violations of intellectual standards by intellectuals has been the practice of attributing an emotion, racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, etc., to those with different views, rather than answering their arguments. Nevertheless, there is sufficient confusion between the meaning of the noun intellectual and the connotations of the same word as an adjective that critics of the behavior of intellectuals are often dismissed as people who are either hostile to intellectual endeavors or people who fail to appreciate intellectual processes or intellectual achievements. Richard Hofstadter's Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, perpetuated this confusion, both in its title and in its contents, where people who criticized intellectuals were depicted as people who exhibit the national disrespect for mind and a dislike of specialists and experts. Even the loss of an election by Adlai Stevenson, a man with only the image of an intellectual, was declared by Russell Jacoby in The Last Intellectuals to be an example of the endemic anti-intellectualism of American society. Yet the American public honors intellectual achievements in science, engineering, or the medical profession, which is to say, fields whose practitioners exhibit high intellectual ability, but who are not intellectuals in the occupational sense defined here. As in many other contexts, inputting unworthy notions to others serves as a substitute for answering their arguments. Incentives and constraints. When we define intellectuals as people whose end products are ideas whose validation process is the approval of peers, we uncover not only an ideological fault line between such people and others with high-level mental skills, but whose end products are technological, medical, scientific, or other goods and services. We also discover a different set of incentives and constraints. The supply of public intellectuals. Ideologically, poll after poll has shown sociologists and scholars in the humanities, for example, to be more often liberal or left politically than are engineers or scientists. In addition to such ideological differences, there are differences in incentives and constraints between intellectuals, in the sense defined here, and other academic or other specialists in mentally demanding fields. For one thing, an engineer can become famous for his work as an engineer, but the world's leading authority on French literature or the history of Mayan civilization is unlikely to be known, much less celebrated, beyond the confines of that specialty. The incentives to become a public intellectual, that is, someone known for comments on issues of the day, whether within or outside that person's specialty, are obviously stronger for intellectuals as defined here, than for others who can gain fame and or fortune without ever bothering to either go beyond their special expertise or even to explain their specialty in layman's language to the general public. A pioneer in heart surgery can gain national or even worldwide acclaim without ever having to explain either the heart or surgery to a lay audience. But a pioneer in linguistics like Noam Chomsky would never become as widely known beyond the confines of his specialty as he has become by commenting on issues and events well beyond the realm of linguistics. The intellectuals we have been studying have usually been public intellectuals, people whose comments help create a climate of opinion in which issues of the day are discussed and ultimately acted upon by those with political power. People in more utilitarian fields, whether in the academic world or not, may also choose as individuals to step outside the boundaries of their competence to comment on a range of issues at large, but there are fewer built-in incentives for them to do so. Professor Richard A. Posner's landmark study, Public Intellectuals, points out that many individuals may become far better known and more highly regarded by the general public than they are by peers within their own respective professions. Many public intellectuals are academics of modest distinction, fortuitously thrust into the limelight by their activities as public intellectuals, he asserts, noting a tendency of a public intellectual's media celebrity to be inverse to his scholarly renown. While it would not be difficult to think of individuals who fit that description, and would therefore have incentives to seek recognition beyond their respective specialties that they have not achieved within those specialties, it would also not be difficult to think of other individuals of the highest levels of achievements within their own specialties who also choose either to write introductory textbooks for students or popular articles and books for the general public on subjects ranging from astronomy to economics. Intellectuals who popularize the field of their own expertise would include Nobel Prize-winning economists like Paul Samuelson, Milton Friedman, Gary Becker, and others, and would include in the law such leading scholars as Robert Bork and Professor Posner himself. However, among the 100 public intellectuals mentioned most often in the media, Posner found only 18 who are also among the 100 intellectuals mentioned most often in the scholarly literature. Media celebrity and scholarly renown are indeed often areas that attract different people. Whatever the relative attractions of the two roles, to be a top scholar and a top popular public intellectual at the same time would require a rare ability to write at very different intellectual levels and in very different styles for a scholarly audience and for the general public. John Maynard Keynes, for example, was one of those with this rare ability. He was internationally known as a public intellectual, writing on issues inside and outside of economics, years before he became both the most famous and the most professionally influential economist of the 20th century. Milton Friedman, so different from Keynes in other respects, likewise had that same rare ability to write at the highest intellectual level of his profession, and at the same time write and speak in a way that made economics understandable to people with no background whatever in the subject. But people with the intellectual and literary versatility of Keynes and Friedman have been extremely rare. While particular intellectually stellar individuals may choose to become public intellectuals for any of a variety of reasons, there are few generally compelling incentives for them to go outside the bounds of their specialty, except for those whom we have defined as intellectuals in the sense of people whose end products are ideas. For intellectuals in this sense, the choice may often be either accepting severe limits on the range of public recognition and public influence available to them, even when they are the best in the world at what they do, or to venture out beyond the bounds of their professional expertise, or even competence, to appeal to a vastly larger and much less discriminating audience. The demand for public intellectuals. Turning from the incentives that lead to a supply of public intellectuals to the demand for such people, we again find an important distinction between those people with high-level mental skills who are intellectuals in our sense, and those who are in mentally demanding fields whose end products are more tangible or more empirically testable. There is a spontaneous demand from the larger society for the end products of engineering, medical, and scientific professions, while whatever demand there is for the end products of sociologists, linguists, or historians comes largely from educational institutions or is created by intellectuals themselves, mostly by stepping outside of whatever academic specialty they are in, to operate as public intellectuals offering solutions to social problems, or by raising alarms over some dire dangers which they claim to have discovered. In short, the demand for public intellectuals is largely manufactured by themselves. Otherwise, whatever the views of such intellectuals about the current state of the world, or about how it might be made better, such views are unlikely to make much difference to the public, or to have any effect on government policy in a democracy. The general public contributes to the income of intellectuals in a variety of ways involuntarily as taxpayers, who support schools, colleges, and various other institutions and programs subsidizing intellectual and artistic endeavors. Other occupations requiring great mental ability, engineers for example, have a vast spontaneous market for their end products, such as airplanes, computers, or buildings. But that is seldom true of people whose end products are ideas. There is neither a large nor a prominent role for them to play in society, unless they create such a role for themselves. There could hardly be a set of incentives and constraints more conducive to getting people of great intellect to say sweeping
Here, rewind a little bit.
top scholar and a top popular public intellectual at the
Gotta rewind a little more. I wasn't listening.
history of Mayan civilization is unlikely to be known, much less celebrated, beyond the confines of that specialty. The incentives to become a public intellectual, that is, someone known for comments on issues of the day, whether within or outside that person's specialty, are obviously stronger for intellectuals, as defined here, than for others who can gain fame and or fortune without ever bothering to either go beyond their special expertise or even to explain their specialty in layman's language to the general public. A pioneer in heart surgery can gain national or even worldwide acclaim without ever having to explain either the heart or surgery to a lay audience. But a pioneer in linguistics like Noam Chomsky would never become as widely known beyond the confines of his specialty as he has become by commenting on issues and events well beyond the realm of linguistics. The intellectuals we have been studying have usually been public intellectuals, people whose comments help create a climate of opinion in which issues of the day are discussed and ultimately acted upon by those with political power. People in more utilitarian fields, whether in the academic world or not, may also choose as individuals to step outside the boundaries of their competence to comment on a range of issues at large, but there are fewer built-in incentives for them to do so. Professor Richard A. Posner's
Rewind a good bit. I'm not catching this.
homophobia, xenophobia,
Oh,
etc.,
not like
to those
that.
with different views, rather than answering their arguments. Nevertheless, there is sufficient confusion between the meaning of the noun intellectual and the connotations of the same word as an adjective that critics of the behavior of intellectuals are often dismissed as people who are either hostile to intellectual endeavors or people who fail to appreciate intellectual processes or intellectual achievements. Richard Hofstadter's Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, perpetuated this confusion, both in its title and in its contents, where people who criticized intellectuals were depicted as people who exhibit the national disrespect for mind and a dislike of specialists and experts. Even the loss of an election by Adlai Stevenson, a man with only the image of an intellectual, was declared by Russell Jacoby in The Last Intellectuals to be an example of the endemic anti-intellectualism of American society. Yet the American public honors intellectual achievements in science, engineering, or the medical profession, which is to say, fields whose practitioners exhibit high intellectual ability, but who are not intellectuals in the occupational sense defined here. As in many other contexts, inputting unworthy notions to others serves as a substitute for answering their arguments. Incentives and constraints. When we define intellectuals as people whose end products are ideas whose validation process is the approval of peers, we uncover not only an ideological fault line between such people and others with high-level mental skills, but whose end products are technological, medical, scientific, or other goods and services. We also discover a different set of incentives and constraints. the supply of public intellectuals. Ideologically, poll after poll has shown sociologists and scholars in the humanities, for example, to be more often liberal or left politically than are engineers or scientists. In addition to such ideological differences, there are differences in incentives and constraints between intellectuals, in the sense defined here, and other academic or other specialists in mentally demanding fields. For one thing, an engineer can become famous for his work as an engineer, but the world's leading authority on French literature or the history of Mayan civilization is unlikely to be known, much less celebrated, beyond the confines of that specialty. The incentives to become a public intellectual, that is, someone known for comments on issues of the day, whether within or outside that person's specialty, are obviously stronger for intellectuals, as defined here, than for others who can gain fame and or fortune without ever bothering to either go beyond their special expertise or even to explain their specialty in layman's language to the general public. A pioneer in heart surgery can gain national or even worldwide acclaim without ever having to explain either the heart or surgery to a lay audience. But a pioneer in linguistics like Noam Chomsky would never become as widely known beyond the confines of his specialty as he has become by commenting on issues and events well beyond the realm of linguistics. The intellectuals we have been studying have usually been public intellectuals, people whose comments help create a climate of opinion in which issues of the day are discussed and ultimately acted upon by those with political power. People in more utilitarian fields, whether in the academic world or not, may also choose as individuals to step outside the boundaries of their competence to comment on a range of issues at large, but there are fewer built-in incentives for them to do so. Professor Richard A. Posner's landmark study, Public Intellectuals, points out that many individuals may become far better known and more highly regarded by the general public than they are by peers within their own respective professions. Many public intellectuals are academics of modest distinction, fortuitously thrust into the limelight by their activities as public intellectuals, he asserts, noting a tendency of a public intellectual's media celebrity to be inverse to his scholarly renown. While it would not be difficult to think of individuals who fit that description, and would therefore have incentives to seek recognition beyond their respective specialties that they have not achieved within those specialties, it would also not be difficult to think of other individuals of the highest levels of achievements within their own specialties who also choose either to write introductory textbooks for students or popular articles and books for the general public on subjects ranging from astronomy to economics. Intellectuals who popularize the field of their own expertise would include Nobel Prize-winning economists like Paul Samuelson, Milton Friedman, Gary Becker, and others, and would include in the law such leading scholars as Robert Bork and Professor Posner himself. However, among the 100 public intellectuals mentioned most often in the media, Posner found only 18 who are also among the 100 intellectuals mentioned most often in the scholarly literature. Media celebrity and scholarly renown are indeed often areas that attract different people. Whatever the relative attractions of the two roles, to be a top scholar and a top popular public intellectual at the same time would require a rare ability to write at very different intellectual levels and in very different styles for a scholarly audience and for the general public. John Maynard Keynes, for example, was one of those with this rare ability. He was internationally known as a public intellectual, writing on issues inside and outside of economics, years before he became both the most famous and the most professionally influential economist of the 20th century. Milton Friedman, so different from Keynes in other respects, likewise had that same rare ability to write at the highest intellectual level of his profession, and at the same time write and speak in a way that made economics understandable to people with no background whatever in the subject. But people with the intellectual and literary versatility of Keynes and Friedman have been extremely rare. While particular intellectually stellar individuals may choose to become public intellectuals for any of a variety of reasons, there are few generally compelling incentives for them to go outside the bounds of their specialty, except for those whom we have defined as intellectuals in the sense of people whose end products are ideas. For intellectuals in this sense, the choice may often be either accepting severe limits on the range of public recognition and public influence available to them, even when they are the best in the world at what they do, or to venture out beyond the bounds of their professional expertise, or even competence, to appeal to a vastly larger and much less discriminating audience. The demand for public intellectuals. Turning from the incentives that lead to a supply of public intellectuals to the demand for such people, we again find an important distinction between those people with high-level mental skills who are intellectuals in our sense, and those who are in mentally demanding fields whose end products are more tangible or more empirically testable. There is a spontaneous demand from the larger society for the end products of engineering, medical, and scientific professions, while whatever demand there is for the end products of sociologists, linguists, or historians comes largely from educational institutions or is created by intellectuals themselves, mostly by stepping outside of whatever academic specialty they are in, to operate as public intellectuals offering solutions to social problems, or by raising alarms over some dire dangers which they claim to have discovered. In short, the demand for public intellectuals is largely manufactured by themselves. Otherwise, whatever the views of such intellectuals about the current state of the world, or about how it might be made better, such views are unlikely to make much difference to the public, or to have any effect on government policy in a democracy. The general public contributes to the income of intellectuals in a variety of ways involuntarily as taxpayers, who support schools, colleges, and various other institutions and programs subsidizing intellectual and artistic endeavors. Other occupations requiring great mental ability, engineers, for example, have a vast spontaneous market for their end products, such as airplanes, computers, or buildings. But that is seldom true of people whose end products are ideas. There is neither a large nor a prominent role for them to play in society, unless they create such a role for themselves. There could hardly be a set of incentives and constraints more conducive to getting people of great intellect to say sweeping, reckless, or even foolish things. Some of those foolish and dangerous things have already been noticed here, but even so, these samples barely scratch the surface of a vast vein of reckless pronouncements by the intelligentsia, stretching back over the generations, and no doubt stretching well into the future. Among academic intellectuals especially, the spontaneous public appreciation and even acclaim for the work of their colleagues in the sciences, engineering, medicine, and other fields provides yet another incentive to seek their own place in the sun. So too does the prominence of many people outside of academia, people in business, courts, politics, sports, and entertainment, for example. But most of these non-intellectuals first achieve public recognition or acclaim by their achievements within their respective areas of specialization, while many intellectuals could achieve comparable public recognition only by going outside their expertise or competence. Who, besides professional philosophers and mathematicians, would have heard of Bertrand Russell if he had not become a public intellectual, making inflammatory comments on things for which he had no qualifications? Similarly, for linguist Noam Chomsky, entomologist Paul Ehrlich, and many others who have stood high within their own specialties, but who attracted public attention only by going outside those specialties to make sweeping and attention-getting statements about things beyond their competence. They need not be outright charlatans, just people whose vast knowledge and understanding of one subject conceals from themselves and from others their fundamental ignorance of the things that bring them to public attention. Those among the academic or school teachers who lack either the inclination or the talent to become public intellectuals can vent their opinions in the classroom to a captive audience of students,
Hello.
operating in a smaller arena, but in a setting with little chance of serious challenge. Are whole societies to be put at risk for such vanities and conceits among a small segment of society?
Okay, fine. I'll stop everything.
And
Alright, thank you.
is that her? Jesus.
Bye.
Hold on, dude. You don't look. He's not wearing clothes.
Oh my gosh.
JJ.
That's my boy. Oh my word. I came at the wrong time.
I was trying to practice his anatomy, but I'm gonna put him in clothes right now. Still, I'm really proud with how it came out.
Way to keep practicing. Good job. Good job. Always. The more you do it, the better you'll get. That's, you know. Yep. What's everyone up?
Thank you.
What's everyone up
I
to
know.
tonight? I'm.
What? Yeah, right now.
A way of putting
I have an early morning tomorrow, but I'm step a little later. I'm making progress on the cover though.
Let's see what you got so far. Oh damn! Look at all of them.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
There is a lot going on.
Hey, TJ, are you streaming right now?
I am, so no cussing. I'm currently doing my first. Yesterday, I me. I should probably warn y'all when I do that. I'm currently doing even bigger. I'm doing more multi-streaming. Yesterday was my first one, multi-streaming with YouTube and Twitch, and now I'm doing YouTube, Twitch, and Kick. I tried to get on Rumble, but I didn't know how to do it, so I gave up. So, not that, in case there's some stragglers on those platforms wanting to wander in here, you never know. It can't hurt.
Okay,
It
Shadrach,
can't hurt.
something.
Huh?
I was looking at Shadrach's shirt to compare how the thing leaves.
Well, we're finally getting the shading. I still need to shade a lot of the Sumka that we got the flat dark, but I want to get their flat colors. In fact, I'm having to give everybody their flat colors, but I don't know if I should shade them all first and then add the colors. But I feel like the contrast won't be obvious if I don't do that. Anyway, as always,
So
an
I'm
learning.
making sleeves or no sleeves, TJ?
You should put sleeves on, John.
Yeah, sleeves. Yeah.
That was the plan.
Oh, sorry, I was reminded of something one of my friends said. They looked up and
What was that?
a funny joke. Oh, good night, mushroom.
Oh, is Mushroom leaving?
Good night, mushroom.
I just got here, Mushroom. Good night.
I am so shy.
I will art.
Same. What also will come with this book is obviously the next batch of stickers, which I guess would be who's maybe some Sunka. Dakota, Comfort. I'm trying to think who's prevalent in this volume. Maybe Onawa. Maybe Samoset. I don't know. Or Takalo finally. I don't know. We'll see.
Yes.
I would like to put comfort and killer on my laptop. So yes.
I'm definitely gonna put Comfort on. I already have. So Tiller obviously was in the first volume. Volume 3. So he's already got himself a little sticker. So now we just gotta get that Comfort to pair with him. And
By the way, I never read what I wanted to read yesterday.
well, why
Oh,
not?
Who is it? Because we got sidetracked. That's why.
We did get sidetracked. We were doing something. We were talking about all kinds of things.
I'm trying to get a reference of somebody raising their arm and how the sleeve looks with the arm and all of the pictures are shirtless, bro. Come on, I just need the sleeve up real quick just to look at it.
People gotta start dressing again. We need to put some clothes on. Hello.
TJ, I'm working as fast as I can, dude.
Good. What's everyone else doing?
I'm working on a world building project, I guess you could say.
A what? Role playing something?
World building?
World building.
Kind of.
That's
Not
all the cool
really.
kids are doing.
I don't know how else to put it. I'm working on a fictional railroad is what I'm working on the map for it. So I'm doing a bunch of research on stuff in the Pacific Northwest. So I want to determine some things in order to make this map. So
Have you
that's what I'm
seen?
doing.
Have you seen those kind of viral, like, I don't know if they're TikToks or whatever, but they're like a song version of someone explaining the mechanics of like how railroads like why they have rocks and like.
I don't use TikTok, so no.
I've only seen it on like Twitter and stuff. I thought of you when I saw it. The thing is, I like too many things on Twitter that me finding it is gonna be like it's not gonna happen. But anyway, there's like a whole thing where someone will just do. There's like a song version of this that's explaining why things were invented the way they were for trains and things. Let's see if I can find it.
That's nice.
Let me see if I can find it.
I do have the Mercy branch southwest from Sheridan. So my idea was like, I don't know, maybe like Barnabas actually does find like he finds like copper and then there's like a copper mine, like Mercy becomes like a copper mine settlement. And they build a railroad out to it in like the 20s, and it's like I need to incorporate scent nods into my various other projects.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm trying to find. 10 years ago, that doesn't sound like what it would be.
although like
Nope.
since you're still since what like 1849, you're still like 20 years off from there being a single mile track in Wyoming, anyways. But I can dream. This takes place in 1980 anyway, so it's not would be relevant.
I want to go find this thing, but I've liked so many things. I like so much on Twitter that it's like not even healthy. I'll never find it.
I can't stand the social media.
I think you're healthier for it, probably. Though it might, I like it. I really like knowing what's going on. And lately it's been a lot going on, so it's been worth keeping an eye on. But maybe I look a little bit too much. I could probably do to assess, get an overview, and then carry on. But there's a lot going on.
That would be a great image if there wasn't a giant ball.
Just scrolling. I'm gonna see if I can find this video though. It's gonna take me 10 years, but maybe. I thought of you. That's why I want to show it to you, because I was like, something that Shoreline would like. Do 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 do. I scroll forever. All I do is scroll, no matter what. My money on my mind, because I'm getting more. Oh, I saw a beautiful painting. I will share it in the chat since I'm here. I really like this for some reason. Something about it was just everything about it was perfect. Oh, come on. Oh, there it is. Okay. Isn't that beautiful? Oh my gosh. It's an incredible painting.
Oh yeah, the cake.
Incredible cake painting. Scrolling. What? Scrolling. I'm gonna keep making songs for scrolling until I find my train video for Shoreline.
Thank you. Don't take up too much.
I found it! Oh my gosh! Yay! Here we go. Okay, here you go.
That looks so good.
Merry Christmas.
Nice.
Okay, you have to watch it.
Okay, I'll watch it right now.
Yeah!
Is it crazy?
I wanna watch it too.
page doesn't exist, try searching for something else. No! Hold on. It won't let me do it because this says the link's broken.
What? Ah. Okay, let me try something else. Oh, Vermin's coming in clutch. Saving the day.
Oop, let me quickly
It's
go
been
on.
way a little bit too much build up on this video now.
I like how the both of us have both looked up the history of Wyoming trains because I looked it up because I was figuring out the logistics of the Scent Express.
I would love. I know I don't have any lore right now that I would ever do for Scent where they would be on a train, but I would love to do an arc, a train arc. You know. Thanks, Vermin. I think trains are so fun, and one of my favorite books, Breaker.
What is this video? This is really fun.
Yay.
How it's like coded to songs.
Little fun fact, my shading technique over the years has come from, there was an artist that did a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog fan art on Instagram, and I liked how they shaded their face, and I thought, I like that, I'm gonna do that, and now here we are.
That is wonderful. I feel like if you just like vocode something to song, it'll get people's attention better.
People are learning knowledge.
Knowledge.
Knowledge. I'm glad I found it. I'm about 30 or 45 minutes from finishing a book, but I ain't reading it right now. It's been good. I'd like to read more. But there's been a lot of good songs lately. Maka threw a good song at me that I already was overwhelmed with songs that I liked. And you know that meme of that girl with too many forks or whatever bakes coming her way? Oh, hello, kitty! I feel bad for not saying. Or Axie. Oh, maybe they, just like before, they came and went. Came and went.
Funny because I was like, huh? Calling me?
Oops. Hope everyone had a good day.
I did have a good day.
Yay!
I'm
I'm
just
having.
glad that I got back in drawing.
I feel like today went by really a bit too fast. And I think I am just a little too distracted. But the progress is being made one step at a time. W Place keeps on summoning me with a ton of pixels to drop, and I'm always like, okay, fine. I'll drop more pixels. Is that what you want?
The W Place addiction.
Yep. Though I don't really want to do it at the moment because I have a lot of like tedious background stuff that I have to do. Alright, let's see.
Be drawing pants for men because it's so hard.
I honestly feel like I don't have to be too intentional here. I can kind of screw eyeball. I gotta get more comfy with just eyeballing some of this stuff because some of it does not need to be that technically correct. Like, this is snow on the ground. No one's gonna be like, that snow's a couple pixels off from the snow that's in the reference that you used. Like, no one cares. No one cares. enjoying the ambiance?
Mhm.
Beep, beep.
I got my bike today or yesterday.
A bike?
Nice. I still have to assemble it. I don't have any of the tools, so I need to like contact my friend saying, "Hey, do you have the tools to assemble the bike?"
You have to assemble your bike?
Yeah, it came in pieces.
Interesting.
I have to like put the front wheel and like the front fender on and like the seat and all of that. It's not too much, but it does require some tools.
Ridiculous. Should not require tools. Should be easy.
Snack bike.
It's like an IKEA bike.
It still requires tools. What the heck?
It's a really nice bike too. Like I do actually like it. So
Ah, you should send a photo of it.
Dude, the whole IKEA thing made me laugh because I'm just like, doesn't that require stuff to assemble that too?
Yeah. I wasn't saying it wasn't like that. I said it's like an IKEA
What
bike.
do you mean, like, so that it had the stuff with it?
Hey? I was just saying if it's assembly required, I was just thinking that's IKEA. That was my joke. It wasn't. It was simple as that. IKEA bike. Well, you don't think I was clever enough? You don't. What do you want from me? What? Your standards are too high.
I'm off the stage. Rose tomato.
Pants is messing me up.
There have been gnats returning to this household, and I don't even know what they're eating, because, like, I feel like I bring food up here. Very frustrating.
Gnats.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the worst.
Oh no, not Gnatas.
Yep, I hate them. I hate them. They ruined my life. Alright, what color am I going to do for this gradient? Can't be gray. Maybe it's peach or tan. Maybe tan. I guess tan it is.
This is so hard. So I don't draw clothes in the first place.
So you just draw simple for afterwards.
Mhm.
Yeah. How goes the fanfic kit?
It's going fine. Haven't worked on it in 2 days, but we'll get there.
No rush, no rush. I was wondering if you were enjoying yourself.
I am.
What?
No stress.
We had another poll today.
I missed it.
It's still going on. You still have.
I want to
17
check, I
hours
want to check.
But it says sent exhibition special 1. Shall this be a one-on-one or a group activity? And so far, it's looking like a group activity.
I guess I'm voting on that since you've made me feel pretty pressured. I also want it to be.
I'm bringing everybody to the table, as in characters from all books. So,
Oh my goodness. Who?
Does this include Aldo?
Good question.
That's a lot of
I don't really
characters.
think about the prologue.
Pants are a pain, Vermin.
I suppose I shall accept that and include everybody as I said I would.
Way to go.
It's sent.
Mm-hmm.
Technically.
It's the prologue.
It's not, yeah, it's not technically sent by Space.
I love how I included, you know what, I'm not going to
I'm
you
trying.
guys haven't read the finale for Intermission 2, I keep consistent with the story.
I'm trying to think if I were to pick a batch of characters I would most enjoy combining. Let me think. Who would I want to put together of the Scent universe? That would be a good idea.
What characters have not appeared on screen, in page with one another? I guess technically on screen because webtoon.
I'm trying to think of who complements each other. I definitely think Kane would have to be there. Shad, maybe Tiller. I think my most dynamic characters, Emmett, Samoset maybe, but Samoset's not really that. Samoset's got vibes, but I don't know if he's quite the personality of like this would be. No, it would be entertaining. I definitely would love a Samoset combo, but that won't be happening. Yeah, I think Tiller, Shad, Emmett, and Kane, and maybe Ruth as the contrast to their strong personalities, and maybe some being the being in which the more decent of them are defensive. I always find that those dynamics very cute. So yeah, that'll be my combo.
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
I think I would combine Tiller, Kane, Shadrach, Emmett, and Ruth, and maybe Samoset. I feel like that would be a fun dynamic.
It's always Samoset.
Yeah, I'm not. I guess I was saying I'm a little torn with Samoset just because he doesn't have quite a ton of like. Again, he has vibes, but he doesn't have quite a lot of like chemistry between characters. He does have aura. He's got good vibes, but or bad vibes, but based on what you're interpreting that. But yeah, he's not had a ton of like. Oh, he does interact with characters, but he's not like that's usually just fear and anger at him. So not like a bit of a back and forth. But I think you could if you wanted to have some fun, you could. If nothing else, just the contrast in his mentality versus someone else's, which would be entertaining.
Yeah, like that would be actually kind of interesting to delve into. Like, what is Samoset like when he's not like trying to scare the other living hell out of all the other stuff? What's his average day, like a relaxation day, like just interacting with fellow
Tormenting.
You know, what does he do?
Would you like fight for fun? You know, for like practicing and whatnot? I'd imagine he does a lot of that.
Again, one thing I wanted to do with Samoset is I wanted him to be not an inherently. I didn't want him to be an unusually villainous. Like he's a villain and he's a bad, cruel character, but I wanted him to be in the sense of cruelty in the sense of it's just the way that they perceive things. Like if you go to this, like if you like the ancient the Aztecs, you know, that kind like Montezuma kind of stuff where it's like okay, not completely unreasonable, not necessarily inherently like unusually evil within his own context, but because of their belief system it's very normal that you do cruel horrible things. It's something like that along those lines. So, which means I didn't want him to just be, wow, look how bad this guy is. But, like, yes, I do want that to be the case. But, like, I'd like a little more nuance in regards to that this can also be something where he's not inherently doing that to everyone in his life. Maybe he's a very loving father. Maybe he's a good father to his kids or a husband.
I called him a lukewarm dad last night.
Lukewarm dad. Ouch.
Okay, so here, let me real quick. While I have the moment, let me read what I wrote last night.
Where'd that come from?
I'll show you. Give me 1 second. Alright, so here it is. I'm gonna read Takalo's bit first because I wanted to read it last time. So it says, I find it that it may be selfish of me, but I think I've said it plenty of times already. One of the main reasons I advocate for Takalo's redemption is merely because I see pieces of myself in him. The desire to be more, the need for assurance, the frustration with one's own weakness. I can't blame him for doing anything he's done when I've made choices that, while didn't result in the physical end of someone's life, it was my own pride that drove off a few from the Lord's mercy. For that sin alone weighs heavy, and for each time I do it, I only resent myself for failing to be as I meant to be. Ignorance is bliss, but it's that bliss that will ultimately unsubscribe you from life if you aren't careful. Am I selfish for wanting to call it a be as I am? Perhaps, but to be left in the dark when you know deep down there's something you could have done, something you should have done, those thoughts don't leave. Even a moment of clarity could change everything, and that pain, while immense, is ultimately fleeting. I embrace it wholeheartedly. The growing pains of a person ever shifting, ever changing, but always trying to improve themselves. To settle with your flaws is to reject perfection, and while I may never reach it here, I can surely try still. Also, who just came in and left? Oh, it was Awari. Okay.
Awari.
Here's the part that I wrote last night. I said, it's funny seeing TG get worked up over a minor sizing mistake when it comes to some of the peace pups. But truthfully, I really wouldn't be bothered if Sunka got bigger. We know there are bigger Sunka out there. If Ohanze and Otakte are an indication of anything, it's that full Nahulo are a whole different kind of beast. But also, another thing I won't ignore is the fact that Sunka are so inherently blessed. They have such a unique opportunity to be closer to not just God's creation of people, but also animals. I'm sure they don't entirely live in harmony with the world around them, but I can't help picture it much like how Wolf Children, the movie, depicted it. I will always be envious of the fact that they have the capability to shapeshift, be man and about 2 types of Sunka forms, their dog and behemoth default form. I just find it a little sad that all that majesty is gifted to a breed of people who've squandered it for the moment. Sure, they think highly of themselves, but by the fact that they bleed red is by all means the proof most would need to know that they aren't truly divine, nor are they rising from the dead. But I can't say it. Oh, but I can say it. By attitude alone, they aren't exuding or commanding the kind of respect you would expect from a creature far removed from humanity. Not even good. They're just bad, even to each other. I'm dying to see more of the inner workings of the broods, but more so this supposed deep love and camaraderie that exists between bloods, because Samoset didn't give us anything with his own daughters. Spoilers. Literally showing more affection, in quotations, and favor toward an individual he held hostage this entire time. I can yield to the fact that Samoset is incredibly intelligent, but it's also really hard not to just write the guy off as inherently evil due to his upbringing when he's not exactly showing anything beyond a man who enjoys suffering.
Listen, he's a bad guy, obviously. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
I said, so like, forgive me for not offering him the benefit of the doubt. I'm certainly looking, but I'm not seeing a whole lot yet to tip the scales for my favor. Good bad guy, excellent antagonist, maybe main bad guy, lukewarm father, and clear sadist. He's not the villain for me to have appeal to where I'm like, mayhaps. But I know for dang sure he didn't raise no daughter to have a half-ass will. Baby girl, now's the time to show that spine I know you've got. We got there, where I'm low-key rooting for Miss Half and Half.
Miss Half and Half.
Miss Half and Half. Put her in coffee.
Toasty said lukewarm father. I don't know why, but that made me chuckle. It's so true, but the phrasing got me. I said it showed in the moments, spoilers, where he offered his daughter no sympathy and openly antagonized her and subsequently embarrassed her and her mama. He's the one to look at Ohanze and go, your fruit is defective. That's your daughter. And Toasty said, most likely. And I said, and I mean, you could argue that this is his own way of trying to, spoilers, forcibly get her to submit to the rules, but he knew. He knew the outcome of this thing before it happened. He relishes the discomfort, the anguish, and the overall despair he can inflict on someone, should he see fit, a certain headmaster's spirit animal. And I mean, I get it, because where you grow despair, you can yield some fantastic resilience in the rebellion and resentment it creates. But this isn't for Onawa's benefit, because she's a creature far too soft for such a brutal approach, and with her resistance, it raises the question of just what kind of harvest she'll yield. Will she truly break the mold, or does that honor remain with Dakota? Dakota is scary close to breaking beyond the barriers that Sunka themselves set in place. The empathy, understanding, and sheer will he gives, I need to see more of him. Hold on, just freaking flicked me up for some reason. It says he's been the naysayer for so long, but he's been so right. I just wish he had more vision, more drive for what this next part is gonna take. Go on, little rock star, shatter the expectation and grasp with greatness. If not him or her, let it be you. And then I said they're amazing and beautiful, but there's a lot left to be desired in their substance. They may just be shallower than plain humans. Talking about Sunka. Didn't think I'd get this worked up by werewolves, but you got me. And Toasty said, that's how you know that they're good werewolves. They provoke good thought and deep discussion. I said, true. Can I pet that dog? Seriously. What I would give to have that kind of power. Takala complains, but being the step above is still an advantage, and he is crippling himself, thinking otherwise. He's so capable, but I fear he may never see it. Blessed are his enemies, as he's not yet at the level to really give them trouble. He may just prove me wrong in the months to come, and make no mistake, I hope he does. PR might have been a flop, and while I'm hoping Mercy won't be a remix repeat, what I would give for just a little recognition for my boy. A singular, granular crumb of validation, even at the risk of feeding his ego. He wouldn't be doing all that if Sunka didn't literally beef with everything in sight. And Toasty said they can't resist drama. They gotta have it in every way they can. And then I said, Samoset, the master brewer of the brood, always stirring up something.
That's my boy.
I'm tired, Toasty. They make me tired. I've never been this exhausted when consuming action media. And Toasty says, they just take the energy out of you. And I said, sometimes I wonder if Ohanzi would be a good conversationalist. I need her to explain to me the things that she's done over her lifetime, because I know we joke about Otakte not pulling his weight or something like that, but he had his moments where I feel we weren't given the whole picture yet. TG humanized them so slowly. And it isn't the mourning I'll accept, or even the attentions she holds as she does what she does now. I want her to explain what she's been doing this entire time, how she lived her life to me. List your accomplishments, your sins, and your shortcomings and your desires, because I need to see all of it. These are the moments of which I envy God's ability to know everything, because I crave the information, but I know it's too much for me, and a majority is straight trash.
Well, I guess we'll see. Nani?
One of the things I love about Sense so much is that even if I don't particularly like specific characters, at least I can see the vision. Like,
Yeah, sir.
Thanks.
Like, I don't like Takalo, obviously, that's the meme, right? But I can see what he's trying to do, and I feel like there's so many pieces of media out there where the antagonists they're just antagonists for the sake of antagonists. And I just like that this is not that. TG, you made something really special.
Oh, I'm
That's what I'm
trying.
saying.
I hope that.
The more as I've started working on my presentation, the more I've really thought about it. It's like, man,
Oh, well, I am so excited to show you finally the next part of the story. So.
And I just wish, because Takao is not stupid. He obviously has that drive. I just wish that there was a way. Kind of wish that there was a way he could channel that in a more positive direction, rather than stroking his self-ego, basically.
What I'd be saying.
It's helpful sometimes.
What I'm saying, I wish Takalo was more like Dakota, kind of, not really. I don't know. That's a thought I have.
Dakota's a great role model. You know.
I want him to embrace the fact that he's a little bit of a loser.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing.
That's not a bad thing.
He just refuses to recognize his weaknesses, and sometimes that just sort of pushes him over the edge into schemes which kind of horribly backfire, or just cause so much pain and suffering. But
And to him included, that's the crazy part, is he's not excluded from the people who suffer.
Yeah, he's a self-destructive character in so many ways.
Much like our protagonist. That's why I said they're kind of the opposite sides of the same coin.
Two morons in a pod.
What a call. I I would say that Takao is probably smarter than Emmett. He's more cunning.
Yeah.
Cunning
Yes.
doesn't make him smarter though. But ironically, they ironically both him and Emmett suffer from the fact of you don't know when to quit, son. You don't know when to stop.
Yeah.
Because the thing that irks me about Emmett is the fact that, like I said, I've talked about this before with Emmett's character, is that I full on support him defending himself, but the way he goes about, defeating, in quotations, the Suga that come and attack him, it just seems a little overly cruel. And ironically, if we get down to it, there's been like a handful of like actual unjustly kills that he's delivered, and that would mostly be against the people who hurt Hannah. Like that first one that he went
Yeah,
up
the
against.
first thing
That was straight murder, like straight on. That's why I was like, geez, boy. And then everybody he's attacked after that, that's when I'm just like, okay, Emmett, you gotta slow down, son. Where are we going?
Now you're both.
That's why I think it's funny that he gave Ruth such flack about giving Cain mercy, but it's like, son, you haven't been doing that for a long time, which I don't blame you, but at the same time, it hasn't been right for you at all.
Well, he wasn't giving her a hard time for being unmerciful. To be fair to my boy, to be fair, at least that's what I do. I'm here to. I'm the Emmett defender and abuser together. So.
I mean, as an abuser would do. No.
So, to be fair, even though it was out of character for him to be so merciless with the Suga he was hunting down, on the other hand, what is the alternative?
I don't think it's uncharacteristic of him to be merciless in the sense of it's kind of just a progression of character because that's what he's used to. He's kind of matching the Suga's energy, which is a bad thing because it's like Emmett, you're better than this, son.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's out of character for him to start acting out, but I'm just saying that it's gonna haunt him further down the road if it's not already because man, what he did to that first guy was brutal as heck. Man. just divorced the head from the body in such a like nasty fashion that I was like, goodness gracious, Emmett. He is his own worst enemy. Dakota doesn't even have to do much to tip him over. The man is just having fun.
He's simultaneously the ultimate protagonist and antagonist, and that's what makes him great.
Yeah.
That's my boy.
This is Schrodinger's man, dude.
Schrodinger's man.
Like, what the heck?
Oh man. Well,
I beseech you, behold, man, and it's just Emmett.
Behold. Well, what I was gonna say, it is a little tough because like, if you left that Sunka to frolic about, the danger is just too like the whole point is like I can't afford to let these guys.
Exactly, because Sunka do not quit.
At
They
least
do not give up.
I understand why Emmett did what he did in that moment, even if in the long run it's not gonna work out for him. I don't think that kind of behavior. So.
Yeah. And then it is a challenge to know when the right time to be merciful is, and if that was like both with that scene and with Otakte, both are scenes where mayhaps there was a missed opportunity there or something of the sort.
No, he had to die. Sorry. That's true. Yeah, Hyundai had to die.
That Otakte had to die. Na 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 na.
What other
Goodbye.
option, realistically speaking, what other option did any of those people as heroes have in that situation? What other option did Emmett have other than to just lay over and give up?
It was a bit of a pickle.
Like,
And in any what direction it could have gone in another direction. A lot depended on the reaction of the Sumka, which yeah. It's one of those things. I kind of, the idea of like, what do you do when you're like trying to be a pacifist and the world is not pacifistic inherently. I'm actually kind of reading a book about that, like this Intellectuals in Society book talks a bit about how before World War II there was this big pacifistic push, especially on like the French and stuff, to in order to prevent war, we're gonna really hype up how bad war is, and then when war comes to their doorstep, the national honor and the sense of dignity that comes with war was like had been trained out of them. So there is something to be said about like you don't want to overly glorify pacifism, because when the world inevitably gets a little hostile, you're gonna have to have somebody step up, and you kind of gotta be okay with being a little tough sometimes. And I'm not sure how. Yeah.
There's a time and a place.
Yeah, and obviously, I think I'm of the impression of, well, if you're, especially with you have to be ready for, like know who's on your team, and the idea is like if you're married to someone or something, like you're not gonna be like preparing for battle with someone who's on your team or something like that. So it's obviously times where if you're constantly in like war mode, you're ruining everything because you're like very, and obviously like I think the idea of turning the other cheek and stuff like that is obviously the ideal of how to live, and it's like we're all constantly getting ready for war. But in this story, they are kind of in having conflict, so it's worth toying with what is the correct choice. And I argue sometimes Emmett's choices were correct, even though they left him scarred from that because he really wanted to be pacifistic. Intentions matter. Obviously, the ones that don't mind killing, like Sam said, don't get beat up at all because they don't care. That's like totally cool where they come from. But for Emmett, it's a huge moral dilemma because his whole point was to be a peacemaker. So it's a bit more.
I would almost argue that for the Bloods, there's no greater honor than to die. So it's like, heck yeah, we're going for it.
Oh well, the greater honor is to win. They like.
This is what I was thinking about, how like self-respect basically boils down to the competing ideas of honor versus self-preservation, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or different forms of self-preservation and different forms of honor.
Yeah, and obviously the different characters have different ideas what that looks like.
Yeah, and you gotta think about like, okay, like what makes, because the Mercy settlers in defending Emmett are motivated not by self-preservation but by their honor, and Hansi in her pursuit of Emmett is motivated not by self-preservation but by honor. But what makes those two different forms of honor? What makes one inherently just and what makes one unjust is a question that
Here's the thing. Here's the really tough reality is that I can't outwardly say that Ohanzi is wrong for pursuing redemption for Otate because of the gravity. I don't think it's been spoken about enough, but the way that she's approaching the situation is like almost like frantic in the sense of like she has a limited window to get this done. And I think it's because Suka believed that, depending on how you die or what happens to your body, you kind of like lose the ability to go to the afterlife, So with Emmett still kind of roaming around, it's kind of like Otate's in disgrace and he won't be able to move on from the mortal realm if Emmett just keeps going on,
I never really thought of it that way. The way I was more getting at was like, at least from my view, what inherently makes the Mercy settlers what inherently makes their actions truly honorable, whereas Ohanzi's actions are kind of like a faux honor, is that with the Macedon alliance, this is fundamentally a personal vendetta that is being taken up primarily by one individual, and a lot of the others are just sort of going along with it, right? Whereas with the Mercy settlers, right, they elected to say, we want to defend this guy, right? So what makes it honorable with the Mercy settlers to defend Emmett, but not for Ohanzi to sort of go after, pursue this vendetta, in my opinion, is fundamentally because the people basically the consent of the people involved. Is it truly honorable to drag an entire group of people potentially down with you if they don't want to, or it's not their issue because it's your own personal issue? Like, does that defeat the point? Which I would say kind of does, but at least that's how I sort of think of it.
I have just to kind of bring another idea into that what you're saying. So this year's been a big year. Like, so as y'all know, this is just me talking. This isn't anything I'm intentionally doing or plot, but I'm just talking. This year I have witnessed the loss of some pretty big figures in regards to, like, my dad passed away. He was the president of a college, very very important in how things got done, and his passing leaves a bit of a vacuum because he's irreplaceable to some extent. Certain people are simply irreplaceable. And you do have this sense of a urgency that comes where you need to do something. You have to do something because something's missing in the world, you know? And it's, I kind of feel like if I was going to project that onto Hanzi, there's a sense of, there has to be something done. He can't just be gone. There has to be something. Some justice has to be accomplished. Something has to fix this. Some action on her part has to fix this problem. However it presents itself, and if maybe the immediate answer is vengeance and justice for her very important significant other, perhaps that is something I could relate to in maybe a something this year. Again, there's just a sense if it's a grand figure, somebody important, you know.
Yeah, and I understand. Here's the thing. While I don't think, like, I think Hanzi's actions, because I don't see, unless everything goes right, I don't see how she can make it out of this alive with either alive or with her honor intact partially.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't know. I understand why she's doing it, right? Like, if I were in her position, I'd probably be doing the same thing, right? But if you take
I would argue it would the more honorable approach in what happened is owning the fact that your spouse lost the fight, because that's just a fact of life, you know.
Yeah.
That would have been the most honorable route to take, was just taking the L. But Asuka can't take the L. They freaking will be like, nah, son, it's not over until I'm dead.
Taking the L and simultaneously putting yourself into a position where something like that can never happen again.
But they're not going to do that. You know why? Because
Yeah,
they
they're not
don't
gonna,
learn
because
from
they're
their
stupid, and
mistakes.
that's
They're going to keep
entirely.
losing people. It's what really raises the question for me is how many losses they've been really taking under the guise of this strength that they're trying to exude, of being like, we're superior, we're on top. What's really going on here? You know?
Yeah, this is really matter, like, when you're all dead.
Yeah. Honor means nothing.
Profound.
Honor means nothing. Pride means nothing. If you're gonna go into the ground for it.
I don't know, kid. I don't know. Wouldn't you say there's a little bit something to, there's more than just being alive, right?
Yeah.
There is, but you know, the real question I gotta ask is, what does God say about honor and about pride?
Well, Jesus died for his beliefs, I guess, to some extent, so.
What? Well, he died for us.
Yes, yeah, he did die for us, but the point is he was, priorities, right. That's what I didn't mean his beliefs, the way I said it was about.
Like, huh?
The thing about pride is that pride so easily leads to so many other sins. So.
That's because it was the first one. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's like the fact that they are so prideful, and effectively they're prideful enough to the fact that they've effectively self-deified themselves, is that they can't do anything wrong. Everything can be explained away or scapegoated or something like that, and that forces the Suga into a very specific course of action, even if that action is inherently self-destructive to basically everything that they do.
That's very astute of you, Shortline, and I think it's also an interesting. You can reflect on that if you look through history and things like that. There's a lot of people that have, like, stubbornly waltzed into destruction because they're really sure they're right, in spite of all the signs.
I'm sort of reminded, so this is back during, I'm going to have to do another World War II thing. This is
Yeah.
Civil War. also Pacific world, and I'm talking about the British. I don't remember the exact details, but it was something that did sort of stick with me, where the British defense of Singapore,
Oh.
where the British were like, we have so many military assets in the Malay Peninsula, Singapore's a fortress, we're gonna defend it. And then they just made poor decision after poor decision after poor decision, and the Japanese were at the gates of Singapore, and the British commanders were talking, and one of them's like, I have my honor to protect. And then there was a comment by, I guess, a younger officer basically said, sir, you lost your honor long ago.
Ooh.
Real.
Of that,
Ooh.
where it's like, in the, yeah, it just reminds me of that.
I
Yeah.
I want to point out the fact that Ohanzi wouldn't be this pressed right now if you hadn't called her back up. Just saying. She put herself in a worse position by starting this barbecue. Now everybody's here and got to do something.
I mean, yeah, and by the way, like, on the note of, like, World War II, there's also, like, the everything that went down with, like, Stalin and the communists, and how everybody, even when it was becoming painfully obvious that the results were horrific, it was like, no, I'm pretty sure I was right about this being a good idea. Like, up till it was completely undeniable, and then it's, like, scoop it under the rug, but, like, it's crazy how long it takes for people to see when it comes to big things, when your pride is on the line, or you being right, it's almost more important for you to be perceived as right than be right.
For you to be perceived as right, than for you to be perceived as truthful.
And maybe if I was maybe I said that wrong, because like I don't even think they care. I don't even know if it's they. It could be me as well. It could be any of us. I think it's not necessarily like they want to be, they or whoever wanted to be perceived as right, but they were willing to believe they were right in the face of, like, those other things cannot be true because I am sure I'm right, because all my friends who agree with me and validate me think I'm right, and they're really the final say on what's correct or not. Me and my clever buddies.
The interesting thing is you bring up like Stalin and World War II, or if you look at like the initial year and a half of the Eastern Front, right? Initially, it was I would say about 2 years. It was very much, I wouldn't say Stalin micromanaging things, but very much the commanders basically telling him what he wanted to hear. And it's sort of strange, where over time, very much, yeah, I guess I would say micromanage. But like over time, once you have enough failures, he did eventually kind of let his commanders just do their own thing as long as they produce results. Which I find sort of interesting, because you have this very prideful, very authoritarian, totalitarian leader who, over the course of a war, eventually is like, okay, almost politely owning up to the reality of things rather than just continuing to bury the head in the sand.
Yeah, their problem was.
It's sort of, you have Hitler was almost the opposite, where initially he sort of lets his commanders do his own thing, but then after, the reality of the situation they find themselves in, just micromanaging units that don't exist by war's end. So
I think the tough thing is when people who have big theories about how to do things but don't even know where to look to see the results, and they don't need to. And since the results can always be skewed, like whether or not you're destroying your food production, for example, the clever folks who are quote unquote micromanaging, who have no idea how food production works, but they're real clever. They know how society works, so they're gonna fix society. And then they like arrest all the farmers, and everyone starves to death. And it's like, well, maybe but they're not looking. They don't need to go look. They get their food from somewhere. They're gonna get food because it's not their problem. And the reality on the ground is surely something else is to blame. Maybe it's the farmers that are left that aren't working hard enough. There's always something else. Like, it's so awful.
I think this is the inherent nature of just any sort of totalitarian, authoritarian, especially totalitarian regimes, where they in effect believe that humans can control reality, that humans can become gods rather than just us existing in a world made by God, and we can only do so much.
Right.
they want to bend reality to their will instead of recognizing reality and adapting to it.
Yeah, and it's also assuming the way economies work is very simple. And I think that's the big harm is like truth is the miracle. You're a part of all this technical stuff. It's a miracle that our stuff gets around like it does, and food, and we have such access to things. And it's really a whole bunch of intricate, complex deals being made by people who know what they're doing all the time. And some random person in the government do not hand it to them because it's like it's no small thing that things function like they do. It's a complex system, not something you can just theoretically control with an idea that you think how you think it should be run. The results are pretty obvious.
You can't bend reality to your will because, man, is God gonna teach you a lesson?
I'll teach you.
What happened with Ed, actually? But now that I really think about it.
Aha! Yeah. Yeah, I was actually having this discussion with we had a Bible study on Wednesday, and we were discussing. I think some people think that what they're looking for, or what God promises when He says He answers prayer, it's like the deal with being in God's will is you becoming more like Him, not necessarily you getting your magical wand wishes for the results of your. I mean, Lord willing, you will get answers to your prayers, but really, the history of the Bible is not filled with these magical wands. It's like we're to be transformed, and that's the real thing that you want to yourself to be transformed.
You don't pray to God to make yourself, more like. Okay, you don't. Here's I don't really know how to put this. You don't pray to God to make yourself more like a god. You pray to God so that you can be more like God.
You can embody
His kind of sense.
You can embody His character. You're not trying to control the world. You're trying to.
You're not trying to have the powers and the glory and the riches of God. You're trying to be more like Him in terms of character.
Exactly.
That's a better way to put it.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed.
Look at that hand.
Huh?
Look at Kit drawing that hand. Those hands.
I'm trying. I don't have enough space between them, so I'm like, shit. It doesn't look the same as the picture I'm drawing, so I'm like angry.
These tiller hands were a bit of a challenge, but I'm pretty happy with how they came out.
They're beautiful, every single knuckle.
Thank
I love
you.
them.
Thank you. I worked hard.
I was sort of interested. Maybe it's because I am religious. I am Christian and whatnot. Maybe I've just always been interested. I've always been really interested in why people self-deify themselves.
This is true.
It's like
Give me an example. Let's give an example, and I'd like to, or not like a particular person, but maybe a general example. And I agree with you because I think our culture is a very much self-validating. You're right about everything.
Sorry.
What, Kit?
Well, I think in a lot of cases we want to feel good about ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we can change the nature of our existence into a way where we can feel good about ourselves, people will try and do that. It always fails because you're acting in a delusional manner at that point. But it's like, yeah, they want to feel good about themselves, and they think that they are all powerful and can bend reality whatever fun little will they want. That'll make themselves feel better, but of course, the pride and the egotism that comes with it pretty much always results in the opposite, right?
Yeah.
You inevitably, you will get crushed under the reality of the situation that cannot be gone.
Yeah, I think there's an unfortunate, inevitable delay to mature. I think when you're younger, you don't quite know how to have a lot of, let's say, self-worth or self-confidence because you're still figuring things out. And unfortunately, I think that when you get a little dopamine hit of someone validating you by like whatever little, without you having to change, someone gives you a, like, hey, you are whatever you want to be, or whatever makes you feel you are valid, and for a brief moment you have some people that see you and think that you're the bee's knees, even though maybe it's just them all kind of being on the same team if we're going to pretend like we all actually are great when we're not. And then unfortunately, I think over time, if your character is bad and your the things that you could have fixed and grown into are stagnated because you thought it was enough to just be validated by the people around you. Eventually, those people leave, and you're still kind of flawed, which we all are. I talked about this a little bit. I think that's why things go south for people pretty quickly, because you have a little moment where you have some people who are saying, yes, you're right, oh my gosh, you're so right, everything about you is perfect, and then they don't stick around because you're not perfect, and truth is, people don't really want to hang out with people who have blaring flaws. I say this with, oh no, I really am rambling, I'm not sure how valid that is, you can correct me on that, but I'm just kind of rambling.
Type of flaw, and depends on the scale, right?
Yeah.
If you're a completely total narcissist, people are not going to want to hang around you.
Yeah. I feel like, unfortunately, that's...
Unless they can get something out of you because of it, which is the sad reality in a lot of situations.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the tough thing with the... Because high school is pretty cruel, but you usually get a little bit of a harsh teaching on whether or not you are being selfish or you're an agreeable person. I think the narcissism and selfishness is always the problem. And I struggled with this when I was in elementary and middle school. I was pretty self-absorbed and had some character flaws that made me just unlikable. And I needed to work on that, and thank God I did. But but like, that was a reality, that the cruelty of maybe young people back in the day caused me to reflect a bit. I'm not saying they were right to treat me that way, but I'm glad I changed. And
adolescence is always cool.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way you can slice it, you know, it's always, because you're just trying to figure out who you are, or what's acceptable, who God wants you to be, and that's not an easy thing to do, and you don't necessarily have the emotional maturity and capacity to really understand it.
Yeah, growing up is hard, and like, even if you're...
You only realize that stuff later on when you get a bit older, you can reflect on, you know, what's actually happened in your life.
Yeah, even if you're like trying and you're working on your like, some of my worst years were when I was like, I was growing a lot in Christ, but I was really bad at the time. But I think that was important that I think those were when I needed him most, maybe. But it wasn't like you suddenly turn to God and everything magically gets better. You don't. It's a slow process to figure out what you need to work on. But
it's the process. I'm finding that out right now.
It's not like a magic wand. Some people really do transform quickly. I've seen it. But I was a much slower case in that regard. But
I am definitely slow. I have bursts. I have seasons where I'm just like, ooh, gotta go fast, and then other times it's like, oh shit.
I mean, life is just
Where am I
kind of
going?
like a continual thing where you, like, after 3 or like 6 months after something happens, I'll like start reflecting on it and be like, okay, yeah, this is the situation where I was acting not in the best manner.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a slow process over time.
Yeah, sir. I'm having a little mini combo with Berman in the chat about Bonhoeffer. I don't know if y'all read Bonhoeffer.
I have no idea what it is.
I actually, as I was telling Berman, I actually prefer his actual writing over the documentary about him. I think his work is more telling than his life's very interesting, of course. Obviously, if you know anything about Bonhoeffer, but I actually like what he wrote a little more. So, hot take there. Hello. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm still trying to navigate and become as wise
Coming together.
as I can. Look at him go!
It's becoming real at a rapid rate.
Let's see. I'm trying to give him I think his pants are too tight. That's my default. That's my default. That's, you know, you can just assume that's what I'll say about everything now.
Bruh.
I'm trying to help.
I'm literally copying the pants that you put them in. That's how you drew them, look, right here.
My day and I come in. The way I would advise is to just erase a bit of those, pardon it, crotch lines. They're a little too well defined. How about that? How about that be my advice?
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah, a little less, yeah.
Why do I find that statement so funny?
Erase the crotch line.
Listen, I realize that they serve a purpose, you know, they need to be there, but maybe not so intense. That's all I'm saying. Like, you know. My
Katie
day.
critiques my art.
I'm here to help, kid. I'm here to help. That's free art advice. You're doing great. Rooting for your progress. To be fair, people y'all crit me sometimes. Usually it's because
That is true.
I made some technical error, and then but unfortunately I did not catch that when I missized the peace sires. Mistakes were made.
The peace sires, is that what they're getting called now?
I kind of like that, though I've kind of been calling them peace pups this whole time, so I don't know. I like peace sires, though. It sounds better than peace pups. It's cooler. It's cooler than peace pups, and that's what's really important.
When we get this medieval fan fiction, it will be
The peace sires.
I really wanted to do a lore book that was all just ballpoint pen, with ballpoint pen and illustrations for all the like details. But getting to it was a bit of a drag because the ballpoint pen takes a lot of work, and I have to really be excited.
I held that. We relaxed the crotch lines.
Good job.
I do like it better than before.
Good job. But I was gonna say,
I wanted to put some lines in the shirt to like indicate like the thing underneath, but like
Yeah, I'm gonna try and make a point to, dude. It's been so I've been wanting to read more lately, but I also have wanted to listen to more music because at the same time all these books have come up I want to read. All these songs have attacked me. There's like I went all year with hardly finding any new music I wanted to listen to, and all of a sudden, there's like a bajillion songs that I'm like want to listen to all at the same time right now. Ridiculous. It's a good problem, but also I wanted to read. I might finish my current audiobook tonight. I'm reading some Thomas Sowell.
I need to read more. I feel like I've mostly just been reading for school, even if it's things that I want to read, like Watchmen. But yeah.
Oh yeah. How's that going?
Huh?
How goes The Watchmen, by the way? How's your?
Good. I'm almost done with it.
Ooh, I'm curious to hear your full review.
Well, I'll hear my full review once I'm done with it.
Looking forward to it.
And then I gotta like simmer on it and probably reread it at some point in order to get the full thoughts. I'm a notoriously painfully slow reader. So.
I'm also that, but only with real books. I can audiobook like the wind. It's a gift.
No, I mean I've listened to like a lot of YouTube videos and talking about that. So,
I'll.
About audiobooks. When I was working over the summer, I listened to a lot of audiobooks. So.
I think YouTube is a very good option. I feel like there's a ton of some good stuff I would like to listen to on YouTube. I also want to like finish the books. I have so many books on my docket.
May God bless the people making long form documentaries. It's the greatest form of content.
Have you been watching any Wendigoon? And he's really great.
Actually, I know Wendigoon. I've seen some of his videos, but I don't like regularly watch him.
Right. I don't watch him too often, though I would if I wasn't audiobooking and doing other things. I think he does a great job at going over, and I wonder if he reviewed The Watchmen. He does like video essays about like thematic elements and things, but usually it's like thrillers and stuff. But he also did Paradise Lost. He does a lot of biblical stuff. So if you like he does some interesting dives into some biblical themes sometimes. But let's see if he did Watchmen. I
Yeah,
highly.
I'm most of the way through. I'm at to deliberately avoid spoilers. I'm at the point where they discover who's actually doing the thing. So
Exciting.
that's descriptively nondescript.
They figured out who did the thing. They did
They
it.
did the thing.
Thrilling. It's been a long time. Again, it's been a very long time since I read it, so I don't know if I'm in a position to efficiently give a review. I have a book that a friend gave me called Having to Hold, and it's like there's no audiobooks of it. It's a very old book. It's very good, but it's a physical book, which means I have done an appalling job at getting through it, and it's been like a year. And she should have had it back. She keeps on bugging me about returning it to her. I'm like, hang on, I'm almost done. I'm not because it's hard to read real books. So hard. I wanted you to know. I'm about to turn in. I gotta get up at like 5:30 tomorrow.
Oh boy. If I was getting up at 5:30, it would have been an hour. I sleep like an hour.
I'm making bad choices. Yeah, I have a con in the morning.
I don't have to get up tomorrow. Well, at like a specific time. Like as long as I get my work done tomorrow. Oh yeah, tomorrow I'm gonna be streaming myself, and I'm gonna be working on the Sun presentation.
Ooh, I wish I was here. I would. Oh, I'm gonna be at a villains. I'm gonna be at a horror con. I have no idea how it's gonna go. It might be horrible. Maybe I don't know if I vibe with the horror people, but I'm gonna try.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be in the evening, so.
Well, maybe I'll pop it on while I'm driving home at around 6:30 or 7.
I like talking to a voice call if other people would like to join.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I'm so excited. An honor. Okay, on that note, I better get out. I better get out of here. Get to sleep.
John's pretty much done. Gotta add a little more floof to his hair.
Big John. There he is. Well done. Well,
My second time drawing him.
Well, I'm going to go to bed, and I'm going to say I have thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and I'm very grateful to have such thoughtful people hanging out with me and chewing on things with me. It is great to chew on things with y'all, so.
Yes, same.
I tried my best.
So.
Have a good night, you two.
Good night. Bye-bye. Bye, Vermin. Bye-bye. Oh, I'm still streaming. Good night. Oh, I forgot I was live. Okay, bye.